the pale blue dot.
Ads, we're recording. All right. Mate, thank you so much I'll shake your hand. Thank you so much for jumping on the show.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Do you want to start off by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself, and the watchers as well, a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, well, that's always a bit tricky to define because, you know, it's a bit intangible, but I suppose I do a lot of listening. I do psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, which involves a invitation for people to really speak in a unique way, to share their dreams, daydreams, fantasies, and to explore the things that are usually uncomfortable or difficult to explore that are giving them symptoms, I suppose, or problems that bring them in.
Yeah. And how did you find yourself into... Well, I guess my first question is, what's the difference between psychoanalysis and psychotherapy?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
In itself, it's sort of open to debate, because there's a lot of overlap, I suppose, but you might say the aims are a little bit different. Classically, psychoanalysis isn't thought to be a therapeutic endeavour, even though people often come to psychoanalysis after having failed through so many other approaches, but it tends to be more of a philosophical, experiential process in which people sort of throw their life into question and come to learn more about who they are and what they want in life. And one of the aims in Lacanian analysis is said to be, I'm not saying anyone's ever achieved this to my knowledge, but to dissolve the ego, which is more aligned with a Buddhist approach, you might say, or a Buddhist thought, not necessarily approach. And in psychotherapy, the aim is not to dissolve the ego as such. It's usually to relieve symptoms, but over a longer period of time, so a depth approach. So look, that we have, so-called psychoanalytic psychotherapists, which, use or borrow some psychoanalytic terms, Freudian terms, for example, or Jungian or Lacanian, depending on the orientation, and call it psychotherapy. There may be overlap, there may be use of the couch, for example, all those things, invitation to explore dreams, daydreams, the unconscious ultimately, really, it's what it's about, is unearthing the repressed, the desires that we don't want to own.
Yes, which is very hard to do.
Absolutely,
yeah.
For all of us.
Yes, exactly right, yeah. And do you think, because you said the goal was to dissolve the ego, but I would understand that it's important to have an ego. I guess an ego that's defined in your own terms. Or could you tell us a bit more about what you mean by the ego?
Yeah, well, I suppose, I think of, there's different definitions. I suppose I think of it as a social construction of our identity description. Who am I? Who are you? That's, who do you see in the mirror? Who do you imagine you are? This I, what is this I? In Buddhism, they often talk about the I being the greatest illusion. There's this I that we cling to for dear life, this sense of self. And yet in Western culture, we have this love affair or obsession with this I, self-esteem. We want to build up the ego, make it strong, be confident. All very noble, and admirable, but at the same time, it's problematic. So I suppose what I mean isn't to disown it, obviously, or ignore it, if that's ridiculous, but to sort of understand that it's a construction. Like other constructions, it has a function, but it also causes myriad of problems. So, to dissolve it, I would say, I don't know how realistic that goal is, but it's a goal nonetheless. But I would say to deconstruct it and try to unpack it and have different layers available.
Yes.
Who are you? Who are you really? This is a big question. Yes. Who are you? Who am I? And what do you really want?
Yes, I think that's such a really great way of saying it, because so often, I guess in this day and age as well, and it's probably being a little bit hypocritical given that I'm using technology, but it's so easy to distract ourselves, and often the difference between who we want to be and who we actually are really tends to grow, and it doesn't become one. Yes. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because of the way society is, at least in the Western world this day and age, or because it's difficult to unpack?
why the discrepancy?
Why do you think it is so difficult for us to, I'll say it like this, why is it so difficult for us to become who we want to be?
Oh, who we want to be?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's that's something else, isn't it? I mean, who we want to be is, this is a question, right? It's not a play on words, but it's a real question I'm going to pose here. You know, who is it that wants to be? Is it the ego, or is it, whose desire is it? Yes, because we're inhabited by desires of others. Despite claiming to be independent and all sorts of things, you know, in analysis, especially Lacanian approach, one comes to realise over time we're inhabited by more desires of others than we would care to admit or realise. So really, who or what is it that wants to be anything? So I think that's the fundamental question. It's not an easy one, and there's no simple answer. I don't have a, you know, obviously I'm not, you know, Lacan, I'm not the Buddha, I don't have an answer for that. It's different for all of us. That's the work, I think. But why is that difficult to actualise who we really are?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
That's a brilliant, Often, the questions you can answer with a question, the tough ones, like, okay, that's a good point. Yeah, wow. So, how deep do we have to go within ourselves then to be able to answer a question like that?
I know, how deep's the rabbit hole?
Yeah.
You know, it depends, I guess, on the person. You know, I suppose, how willing and interested one individual is to really throw into question all the illusions that we cling to. And that give us degrees of enjoyment, but at a cost. So it's
a volatile world in there, isn't it?
Very volatile.
And what are some ways that we can access that world?
The inner world, the unconscious. Well, you know, the ways I know, you know, in analysis, it's the method that Freud developed of free association, which just means it's not free speech, but it means speaking without thinking. So a bit like in meditation, one is invited, in mindfulness meditation, one's invited to explore their thoughts, feelings, emotions, breath, whatever, body sensations without judgment or criticism, just allow it to happen without interfering. In a similar way, it's a speech process. It's a social or relational process in which one speaks different to confession, yes, where the ego comes to unburden itself ultimately, with some conscious knowledge. Well, in analysis, they might do that, but they go beyond that through speaking without a predetermined plan, speaking beyond ego, speaking, if you like, without thinking, so that the unconscious may emerge, especially through exploring dreams, slips of the tongue. You know,
slips of the tongue?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one here. This is interesting. Every now and then, I will accidentally call my girlfriend my sister's name. What does that mean?
Oh, no. You know you're being filmed, so...
Yes, I do. I do.
Just bear that in mind.
I'm not equal. I'm not somehow attracted to my sister, am I?
Well, you know, Freud said there's no negation in the unconscious, so I'm going to leave it at that. But, you know, it's something for you to talk about, I suppose, you know, if you're interested with somebody. To ponder that. But, you know, your question's good, and there's no universal answer. In my approach of the approach I take, it's not my approach, but you know what I mean, the one I practice, you know, other approaches may believe in, say, universal archetype or unconscious meaning, whereas in the approach I practice from, it's very singular. You know, so it might be very tempting, you know, in some schools of thought to say, well, yes, you means you are attracted to your sister, especially because you deny it.
Yes.
But I'm not going to rush to that conclusion because, you know, there's more than likely a lot more to the story than even you're aware of. And I don't have the knowledge of your unconscious. We just met. So, yes, it's
could be like I'm attracted to certain qualities that are similar in both of them or something like that. Yeah. Fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
So what do you mean about dreams then? How can we dive into, because a lot of people I think in this day and age seem to think that a dream is just essentially you know, the mind trying to filter through unnecessary information for, you know, throughout the day, but the analysts have a different approach.
Yes, we certainly do. Yes, and I suppose what you're saying is true. That we are taught, most of us from a young age, that you hear all sorts of comforting, well-intended
Yes.
phrases like "it's just a dream."
Yeah, you'll be fine.
You'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
In other words, ignore it. Or it's understandable. A kid has a nightmare. You don't want to freak them out.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I don't think many of us are invited to really pay much attention to our inner world, our desires that are repressed, that are starting to slip out, come out at night, or when we're less defended, I suppose you could say. So, part of the analysis for some people can be, changing that habit from ignoring dreams to starting to pay attention to them on purpose. But some people come in with an open mind or who are very interested in dreams to begin with, so it depends on the individual.
Yeah, and do people come to you specifically for psychoanalytic means, or do they come to you because I can't imagine that people who aren't well versed in the land of the mind actually know the difference between psychotherapy, psychoanalytic, all that sort of stuff. So do you tend to focus on, I guess it's more just about the individual you're with, but I'm assuming.
Yes,
but,
that's fair.
Yeah. But sometimes if they say, like, would you ask them to talk about their dreams? Would you ask them to talk about things that they think they may have repressed? Or?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a good point because many people don't not only know the difference between analysis and psychotherapy, but it's so confusing out there. I mean, there's psychiatry, there's psychology, there's psychotherapy, there's counselling, and then every day or week there's a new latest and greatest approach. So
there is kale.
Right, kale. Well, there you go. So my job's done. You
Yes,
just eat kale, and
I should be speaking to a big kale.
You should be. I don't know if it'll speak back though.
Sure.
Hopefully not.
Yes.
So it is like you say about the individual, but the invitation would be, however, as gently as possible to help them to explore their unconscious. Yes. Even people who are familiar with analysis or been through an analysis, we all have, those of us who have a working unconscious that can participate in analysis. Well, we're all subject to the same forces, I suppose, of repression, which means there are things we don't want to know
about ourselves.
Yeah, despite claiming otherwise. Our egos say, yes, I'm ready. I'm going to be open with you. I'm going to do everything to, put it all on the line. That's all very well and good, but that's an ego intention. To actually do the work, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
For all of us, I think.
So how would you begin to, let's say someone comes to you and says, Adam, I'm dealing with something that I don't know what to do. I feel like I am ready. How would one begin the process? Is it homework they can do themselves?
It's a good question. I don't give homework. As a general rule, I don't, that's, not an orthodox rule. I might for some, but typically not. Because the whole, approach is speech. So the idea is to speak in the sessions. In the idea that we're alienated by other desires and other meanings, yes? So I wouldn't suggest necessarily go out and do your own homework and get more confused. They call it Dr. Google, so people often do enough of that anyway.
Yeah.
Or too much of that.
Yeah.
So, the idea isn't to sort of learn new tricks, it's to invite oneself to really speak and start to confront.
And how can you tell the difference between when your ego is speaking and when the thing that we're trying to actually actualize to conscious awareness is speaking?
That's a really, really good question.
Yeah.
There's no hard and fast rule, and I would just say to that, when something significant changes, in the sense of, during a session, it might be that they say something that completely surprises them, that they might defend vigorously with their ego. I didn't mean to say that, that's really not me. usually you're on something there. Or something significant changes in their life. They come back and report, hey, I've suffered X, Y, and Z symptom for 25 years, and for some reason I'm not anxious anymore in this situation. I don't know why. You often say, something was said that, unbeknown to them, made a change in their unconscious, or in the economy of their unconscious desire. Something shifted.
And it can just be as simple as that. Like when they say something or something flicks as a switch, it can just, I don't know what the right word is, like relax all of this underlying tension.
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, there's tension anyway. It's not a either or, of course. But I suppose it's possible, and it happens. But simple yes, easy no. Easy no. It's very difficult. Ask. It's a big commitment. Hypnotherapy is a lot more popular because it has the flavour of being a quick fix and not having to work hard. By way of example. Look, but it can be, yes, very simple. And often it is when we let go of the ego, for want of a better term, letting go of clinging and relaxing and speaking without that demand to perform or that demand to, come up with some brilliant solution. Speak from a place of not knowing.
Yeah, you touched on something really important there. I think I really like, that quick fix idea is a big driver in this day and age with anything. You take this protein shake or you deal with that sort of stuff. One of Carl Jung's quotes, which I love, was, "Be careful of wisdom you didn't ask for." And I think that the benefit of psychoanalytic work is that the discipline of continuing to face the shadow, continuing to face the things that you don't like, you actually become, you become, because you can look back on all that work that you've done, and you can go, God, I'm capable of so much more than I thought, as opposed to just having a quick hypnotherapy session, having a quick, transcendent experience on psychedelics or whatever. But at the same time, do you think there is a place for those things?
Oh, well, I don't have an opinion on them. I mean, I certainly don't have the authority to say yes or no. I mean, you joked about kale and protein shakes, so why not? We have a body. We have, but I think that the difference, of course, is when it comes to an over-reliance on quick, easy solutions that override the difficult work of interrogating the unconscious, then I'm skeptical. And you hear it, people say, well, I'm just going to exercise. I don't need therapy, or I don't need analysis, because I can exercise and get my endorphin rush, or whatever, and eat kale all day. Well, yes, you can, and that's well and good, but it's not going to change your unconscious fixations. It might change how you feel in the short term, but so I don't know. It's what is the interface between those things and analysis? I don't know.
Right, so could you give us a definition of what the unconscious is for people that aren't aware?
Well, there's different definitions. I guess I think of it as not wanting what you desire.
Not wanting what you desire. Right.
So the ego... So the desires in the unconscious are incompatible with the ego ideals. So who you are according to you, what you think you are, who you want to be, who you want to present to the world and to yourself, isn't necessarily compatible with your true desires. True in the sense of what you really feel and want deep down, as evidenced by dreams, slips of the tongue, behaviours, so on. And these are irreconcilable, incompatible conflicts that we all carry that we have to contend with for our lives.
Wow. Yeah.
These lofty ideals and promises from many therapeutic approaches and self-help sphere is that you can eradicate them, just by doing a few quick tricks, have a protein shake or whatever, I don't think they eradicate. No, you might suppress them for a while, but it's the question is, how do you contend with these incompatible desires.
Yeah.
Between the ego and the unconscious.
And how does one know if one is really fighting not to contend with those? Like, I'm assuming that anxiety and depression.
Well, we all fight to not contend with them.
Right. So why are they there? Like what have you seen is, I'm just very interested by this. Like what if we all have them, even the psychoanalysts, you know, have this thing.
Yes.
Like what is it that's how, I don't know, I just think that like if it's always there, and is it a continuing stage of becoming to continually introspect and find that deeper truth? Yeah.
Well, it's a good question. I think in analysis, if you're talking about during an analysis, it's not. This is just my opinion,
of course,
and you know others will understandably differ. But
we're interviewing you now, mate.
That's it. So in my view, I don't really think of it that way. That it's a perpetual process of digging or uncovering new truths, because causality is a problem. The whole concept of causality, of what causes what. I think it's more a process of change and becoming. Certainly, we do explore the past, you know, as, you can't ignore it, it's so important, but the history isn't a taking of a history or just a telling of some chronological history, it's a change, something changes. The idea is that something will shift. So it's not about simply finding out what's hidden and buried in some, what happened when I was 5 or whatever. I mean, all of that's important if, you know, things need to be said, which they do, but it's about, I think, changing, like going beyond.
I see.
You know, because, you know, there are many of us, probably just about everyone I've met will at some point say things like, well, yes, I know why I do X, but I still do it. So consciously understanding something isn't really the goal of analysis.
Okay.
You know, it's not about just finding out, you know, some hidden, you know, unconscious meaning, but it's about what do you do with that? You know, what do you want?
That's so practical. I love that.
It's practical. It's difficult to contend with difficult questions. You know?
Yeah.
We're all forced. You know, Sophie's Choice. That difficult. Well, it's a philosophical story. You know, I mean, we all have them. The classic, you know, is, you know, it's like if you're on a lifeboat. What do you do? You know, who do you save?
Yeah.
Horrible choice, but it's a forced choice. But we all have to make choices that are very difficult all the time. So in analysis, there comes points in which we have to make choices for our lives. We're faced with, do I want to keep living this way that is familiar, is predictable, causes a lot of enjoyment but a lot more suffering? Do I want to continue it or make something new?
Am I going to continually let the past define me? That idea, as opposed to so psychoanalysis is equally in part about coming to understand why you are the way you are, and then looking to mold yourself into who you would like to be, and how you can look back on your life and actually be proud of it. To some degree.
That sounds nice. I don't know if one will be proud or not.
True.
They may not be proud.
Maybe more proud.
Maybe more proud.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's you know, you could think of it that way, as expanding choice ultimately. But it's up to the person what they do with that. You know, the analyst doesn't tell people what to do. Hopefully, you know, how to run their lives. Even though we get asked all the time, what should I do? X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Yeah. Alan Watts is one of my favourite philosophers.
Alan Watts.
Read a lot of his work. And
Yes.
He's really fantastic, and I think the reason why I love him so much is because he's so simple, the way he speaks and the way he writes. And it's just like, you'll read a line from him and you'll be like, oh shit, like, why have I never thought of it like that, you know?
Right.
And you just made me think of him when you said, depends on what you want to do with this newfound knowledge. And he was giving a talk once, and he was saying something like, you know, people always ask me, is it necessary to meditate? Is it necessary to do all this? And he says, well, it depends on what you want to do.
Right.
You know, if you want to go to New York, it's necessary that you have to take the highway.
Right.
Like, it's, you know, I love that line. It's just like, it depends on what you want to do. Like if, if you want to completely dissolve the ego because you want to be a Buddha, then maybe it is probably necessary to introspect for the rest of your life.
It might be a clue. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And we'll bring it back for a minute. I wanted to hear about how you came to find psychoanalysis. I'm assuming you did a lot of study and you would have done a lot of general studies with bits and bobs, and then why did you choose psychoanalysis?
Well, I started with hypnosis.
Did you really?
Once, many moons ago.
Yeah.
And I was getting good results. What I thought were good results.
A bit like Freud.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But like Freud, sort of realizing that the effects were short-lived for a lot of symptom. I still promote hypnosis though. I don't think it's an either or. I believe in it for a lot of things.
Can they complement each other, perhaps?
They contradict.
Oh, they do.
But for things like pain management, nail biting, smoking, aligning, I guess, the pre-conscious and the conscious, and activating the pre-conscious, or what I think many call the subconscious, sure. But in terms of working with the unconscious, that's another domain. I just found it limiting and not really enough for what I was looking for. So, and I got interested in Buddhist thought and mindfulness, and started to find some kind of practice involving both, really.
How do they contradict each other? Just
suggestion, and the ideal ego of the hypnotist, being the authority figure, despite the lip service you always hear, it's all about the person, whatever, but ultimately people come in and project so much into the power of the hypnotist to give them suggestions or whatever. It's going in, whereas in analysis we want to take out, not put in new.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. Is that a reason why a psychoanalyst is so against, I guess, the idea of intersubjectivity, bringing themselves into the picture as well, because that would conflict with. I just imagine that if you started talking about your own experience, because
right.
I've always found this very interesting. Like a human building rapport between human beings is very much about trust, about bringing relationship, platonic or not, into the picture. And I feel like I would know you better, as you would know me better if we started talking about our lives and all that sort of stuff. But I guess it makes sense that if your job, even professionality aside, if your job is to allow me a space to bring my stuff out, it has to completely negate you in the picture.
I don't know if that's possible, but
of course, yes.
To completely negate.
Just minimalise your influence on what I'm saying.
Yes, yes. It's very problematic to self-disclose. Because then it becomes, that the content can become part of a person's fantasy and desire, because we're all constantly trying to read what the other wants. So if you keep your desire enigmatic, then yes, it causes disruption and anxiety and all sorts of things, but it's the only way that I know that it can open up a space in which one can truly question what they want for themselves, which is a big question. A big question. We think it's simple. I want a new car or I want a house or whatever, but these are conscious wishes.
I do, mate. You know everything about me.
Well, good luck. I hope you find it. But seriously, it's my desires mixed in. And sure, some of my desires are clear. Obviously, there's a fee. There's a desire for them to speak. But for the most part, it's kept out of the room, and they're left guessing, and they're left to really question themselves. And that's the theory and the practice. But you raise a good point of what about rapport and trust. It's a dance. It's a balancing act. it's always, I think of it, you might think of it as a risk-benefit analysis. The risk, the benefit outweighs the risk. That there is a risk people will leave, or they'll feel too alienated, or isolated, and that we do what we can to address that by talking. But I think the aim is not to make people's egos feel better and good about themselves and feel confident. You want them to feel safe, of course, to speak, but at what cost? So it's making it safe through other means, I think, not through self-disclosure.
Yes, it's giving them a safe environment to toil with that. The unsafe approach, what the ego thinks is unsafe, which is actually the most safe, best thing they could do.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So who's been pivotal in your study, in your research? What are the psychoanalysts that you've really been influenced by?
Well, Freud, of course. And, I think his work's monumental. Of course, some of it's a little bit questionable, but for his time, it was quite astonishing. And you've got to realise the era. When people read it, they forget that it was over 100 years ago. What they're reading, it's not compatible with our cultural traditions, and there's been a lot of criticism that he's sexist or whatever. But fine, and that's probably true. But if you take the good from it, I find his work's still very relevant today. And of course Lacanian thought is really speaks to me.
Right.
But I'll warn you, if you ever read Lacan, don't expect an Alan Watts simplicity. It's deliberately the opposite. It kind of drives you a little bit crazy. But
I got that from Jung. When I was reading a lot of Jung, I went crazy.
Oh, okay.
that was a space in my life where I was analysing every single detail of my dreams, 10,000 word pages, like multiple books of just I felt like the worlds between my external world and my internal world were becoming very misconstrued, and I'd start to not that I was hallucinating and things, but in the middle of the night I'd wake up and then I'd be awake for long enough to be like, okay, I'm awake, but then I'd see things, and it was just like, there were things that were coming up out of nowhere, and it started these incredible dreams about oceans and diving into the bottom of the sea and doing all these incredible things. It was just, his work was incredible, but it was like a very traumatic experience, which was cool, but the best thing that ever happened to me.
Right.
So it was good. Could you give us that's just a bit of background for me, could you give us a bit of an overview of what Freud's work was? Because I think a lot of people would think of his work as just, he was just obsessed with sexuality and mothers and fathers and the Oedipus complex and all that sort of thing. So,
well, maybe that's true. I mean,
as well.
He might have been obsessed, but there are more lethal obsessions than being obsessed with those things. But anyway, look, I don't know if that's right, but sexuality definitely. But that's what's repressed. Usually is the sexual side of us. You might argue against that in our modern world. It seems to be everywhere, promoted all the time. But that's not what he meant by sexuality. It's not genital to genital, simply put. It's it's the desires that are and the modes of enjoyment that get repressed, that we prefer not to admit to ourselves. And I think he came to some extraordinary discoveries around sexuality and aggression, but he articulated the realization of the unconscious. So I think there's a lot to it. No question. There's 24 volumes. But 24 is the indexes, but essentially, and they're monumental. And I think really his discovery. Did he discover the unconscious? Well, that's debatable, but he articulated something of the unconscious in a way that started to really make people think about it differently. And he was a neurologist, for his time, and so very open-minded for that particular.
Do we all have? So it almost sounds like his goal was. Allowing people to express their pleasurable pursuits almost. but we have multiple pursuits, don't we? We want spiritual freedom, sexual freedom, financial freedom, you know, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, was he trying to go within the mind of the unconscious for people and allow them to feel like they could express their desires and things like that? Was it just sexual related, or was it?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends, you know, also what period of his work you're reading. Of course, he changed as well in his approach as he aged, as you know, and practiced and learned from his mistakes and all of that. So, you know, but I think there was a sexual bias, but for good reason. You know, it wasn't just because he was a sex maniac or something. You know, he really thought about it, and if you read it carefully, I think there's a lot of wisdom behind a lot of what he said. Not everything. Some of it might seem a bit kooky, but you know.
I mean, like it's so pertinent to the time as well.
Right.
Like because you know, like you literally just said, we're so much more freer in talking about that sort of stuff, and you know all these different movements and things, and people doing ecstatic dance, and people go to all these incredible like sex festivals and things. And that wasn't like that back then, you know. So
you'd be arrested or something.
Yeah, you can understand why sexual repression was such an issue for so many people back then.
But I think it's still repressed in a different way here, you know. Well, it is. I mean, I'm certain of it. But yes, it seems that we've flipped as a culture, but the unconscious is still repressing. If anything, it makes the tension worse, you know, because the demand is so strong to enjoy, the cultural imperative, if you like, you know, because enjoyment's at your fingertips. Hey, you can log onto a website and get yourself off in how many seconds. You know, it becomes a competition almost. This pressurized demand. So enjoyments and desire and repression, that's always been there, it's always going to be there.
Right.
I think it doesn't matter the era.
Yeah, okay.
Just in different shapes and sizes.
Okay. And so then what would be the goal with that? Because I find it interesting that if we're always going to have, you know, a shadow and repression and you know, what's the goal? Like, how do we win? If it's always going to be there.
What was Alan Watts' quote again about the highway?
Depends on where you want to go.
Probably.
Yeah.
You know, because if you don't want to look at the shadow, then you don't want to. It'll still follow you, obviously.
Of course.
But yeah, if you're talking about it in an analysis, I guess it's to come to know more about who you are and what you want, and to change something fundamental.
Can you change? I mean, I know you can change who you are and what you want, but I imagine would there be people out there that would come to realise certain things about themselves not like that, and then try to change that? Or that only further lead to their psychological issues?
Well, all the time we find what we don't like. And
yeah.
Hence it's repressed in the first place, I suppose. So I don't know if it furthers their psychological issues. I guess it would depend. I mean, it can, you know, and that's not obviously not the aim to make them worse. But yes, it's possible. But usually it's a freeing, more of a freeing process, expansive process. It may lead to some transitory anxieties as something comes up to the surface, but
as the ego tries to hold on to itself.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay, I've got one more final question before we move on, because I know you have to keep going.
Yeah.
How does one analyse one's dreams? Or like, could you give us like if you wake up and you remember a specifically painful dream or something, like how do we look into that? Yeah.
Okay, well, you know, it depends on the approach, and the approach, I can only speak from my own experience in analysis.
Do you do it yourself? Analyse your
Well, actually, I do in analysis, but not, I mean, as Freud said somewhere, you know, self-analysis has its limits. For no other limit, the limit of being biased against oneself, censorship. Despite our conscious efforts, we will represent ourselves how we want, according to our ego. So somebody else hearing the dream is critical, absolutely crucial. I don't believe there's a universal meaning to dreams, to dream content. I think it's very singular and particular. So I think it's important to bring those dreams to an analysis and speak them. and then free associate to the different dream elements, and trace those back to wherever they go and follow those thoughts.
Okay.
But you need another person
Right.
to hear that, an analyst preferably, to hear and to feed back what they hear that may be different to what you or I hear, yes?
Yes.
Such that something can hopefully move.
Right. Yeah. So you would say, this is what my dream was, and then you would step in and say, I don't know, what does that mean to you? What, like, would you look at the specific contents of the dream and then try to dissolve a big picture?
Yes. For example, specific words that they use, and also the way they talk about the dream. You know,
emotions that are relevant as well.
Emotions, we don't ignore emotions, but emotions are not seen as primarily as important as thoughts, in the sense that emotions come later, and emotions are subject to displacement, meaning that, you know, other than anxiety, most emotions are just different versions of themselves, if you like. You know, anger, fear, you know, they can change over time, but the thoughts, the ideas of what is repressed is what Lacan will call a signifier, or a word, or a sound of a word that gets repressed, and that splits off into other emotions, which, you know, so if you follow the emotion, it can be an literally an endless merry-go-round journey, without ever getting at the repressed. So yes, the emotions are important, but in dream work, it's more about following what people say are the different dream elements that they say, and following what they say about it.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. Tell us a bit about Bayside, just very quickly.
Okay.
So people how can find you, because a lot of listeners are from Melbourne here. So.
Okay, all right, sure. So, well, you know, so we're in Bentley at the moment. You know, we were in Brighton for about 7 years prior. So we've got, you know, obviously we heard a little bit about my approach in psychoanalysis and Lacanian analysis, but, you know, that's a long-term commitment. It's not for everyone. We also we have hypnotherapists, we have counsellors, have a psychologist, and we also have downstairs a chiropractor and a Feldenkrais practitioner. So,
great.
yeah.
Something for everyone.
We want one-stop shop, but we don't have kale or protein shakes. So
mate,
you'll
this
have
is where I come in.
You'll have to, you know, they'll have to see you.
I'll bring some samples.
Sounds
cool. All right. How do people find this place and yourself at website, social media?
Go to our website. There should be a link somewhere.
Yes,
or
we'll put links up.
Put a link, and people can click on the link if they're interested. They can give us a call and come and have a talk.
Great. Awesome. Thanks so much for doing the show, mate.
No, it's been great. Thank you, Tom.
Awesome.